What I'll say this, and this is my stance permanently, Piers, which is that an ugly peace in the Ukrainian war, an ugly peace, and virtually in all situations, an ugly peace is better than a hot war.
Okay, I mean, I find it strange that you wouldn't say, obviously, you got to kick him out of Poland.
So, Piers, I'm going to defer to your former UK Prime Minister, who stated this week that there's this segment of the Republican Party that has a weird homoerotic fixation on Putin. They love his tough guy image. They love his tough guy politics. Doesn't appeal to me, but it does appeal to a certain segment of the Republican Party.
In this video, Jake Broe silences Benny Johnson and a delusional libertarian in a heated 2v1. And we dive into one of the most chaotic yet revealing Ukraine debates yet. On one side, you've got Jake Broe, just calm, sharp, and actually informed, facing off against Benny Johnson and a libertarian rant machine so far down the anti-American rabbit hole he might as well be hosting a conspiracy podcast from 2004. We'll see how Scott Horton just goes off the rails blaming America for pretty much everything from Crimea to, I don't know, probably his Wi-Fi lag. And when Jake calmly just presses him for clarity, Scott just explodes like he stubbed his toe on NATO. And Benny for his part tries to sound balanced, but ends up just offering a vague, hollow take that doesn't really say that much. Meanwhile, Jake just immediately shifts the tone, cutting through the surface level rhetoric with something way more direct and uncomfortable for the room. You can already feel the contrast. So make sure to watch till the end to see how Jake Broe silences Benny Johnson and a delusional libertarian in a heated 2v1.
And to bring up the neocons and what happened 20, 25 years ago, I didn't support the Iraq War. I was 19 in 2003. And I'm firmly in support of this war, supporting Ukraine, because this is a generational fight. History is repeating itself. All the claims that Putin is making about Russian speakers in the Donbass region and past territorial claims, it's the exact same argument that Hitler made in World War II, going into the Rhineland and then Czechoslovakia and, of course, Poland. And the other panel member talking about America First, we had an America First movement in 1938, 1939, 1940 to keep the United States out of World War II. I don't want to go to war. I don't like war. But sometimes democratic nations aren't given a choice. What is happening today has never happened since the advent of nuclear weapons. A nuclear-powered state has said, this territory used to belong to us, we want it back, give it to us because we have nuclear weapons. This is not something the Western Alliance or the international community can tolerate. Nuclear states talking about historical claims, saying, give us back territory that once belonged to us, otherwise we're going to nuke you. Day 2 of this full-scale invasion, and we just went over 1,000 days. Day 2, Putin raised the equivalent of his DEFCON, saying, don't help Kyiv. Don't give any assistance, otherwise we might use nukes. And for 1,000 days, they haven't used nukes because they can't. I can lay out the arguments why, but this is not tolerable because it'll never end. If this works, it will embolden dictators around the world, the first group who already have nukes, to start talking about historical claims because they know the international community is not going to stop them. And any dictators that want to go and get back historical territory, they're going to want nukes. And for any smaller country who doesn't feel defended by the international community, they're also going to want nukes now because the United States, France, UK, the democratic countries that have nuclear weapons are not going to help them. Okay. They're not going to defend them.
Alright, so this is where Jake Broe just really starts separating himself from the rest of the panel. Everyone else is either stuck in a Cold War nostalgia or just screaming about America being the root of all evil. But Jake, he's just laser focused. He doesn't just defend US support for Ukraine, he builds a case around why the war is fundamentally different from the ones that came before it. No dramatics, no shouting, just calmly connecting the dots between Putin's revisionist claims and the exact same rhetoric that led to the outbreak of World War II. And that's the key here. He draws the line from Donbass to Rhineland, from Putin's Russian speaker's excuse to Hitler's Sudetenland justification. And it's not a cheap comparison, it's accurate. Because when a nuclear state starts flexing its arsenal to reclaim its historic territory, you're not just looking at the border dispute anymore. You're staring right at the blueprint for future wars that only get more dangerous. Then Jake takes it even further, pointing out the global consequences, how this sets off a chain reaction that encourages other dictators to pursue nukes, and other similar nations to start considering nuclear weapons just to survive. And honestly, that's the kind of long view argument most people don't make in these debates. He's not just responding to the moment, he's warning about the precedent it sets.
Okay, let me go to Scott, because you've literally written a book about this. Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. There's no doubt, when you look at the full history going back to the start of the 90s, it's complicated. There's no doubt. It is a complicated history there. It's not clear-cut. It's not simple, I don't think. A bit of American meddling in there, a bit of Russian meddling. Everyone's meddling around in Ukraine. I think the theme of your book, though, is that very much that Russia was provoked into waging this war. Why do you say that?
Well, of course, it was. It was American meddling, as you say, going back really to the end of the last Cold War, as I document in the book. And I would object to sort of the way that you paraphrase it earlier in the show, that I think you're implying that I would argue that Kiev brought this on themselves, as the subtitle there says, Washington is the one who brought this on.
I wasn't talking about you directly there, sorry.
Yeah. Right, it's okay. I just want to clarify. And I'm not arguing either that they gave the Russians no choice, because I think they had lots of choices to do this. That still doesn't absolve the responsibility of the Americans. And basically, to sum it up, it's broken promises on NATO expansion. It's missile defense systems installed in Romania and Poland in violation of the Founding Act of 1997. And it's essentially an American-backed side in a long-term civil war that's going on in the country after America overthrew the government twice in 10 years, in the Orange Revolution of 2004 and the Maidan Revolution of 2014, because the wrong guy kept winning the election. And as the Americans said over and over again, and I document it as thoroughly as could be, we are taking Ukraine away from Russia. This is not allowing Ukraine to be independent. This is America forcing the issue. And as everyone on this panel knows, the status quo in Crimea held from 1991 all the way through 2014. Until America overthrew the government there for the second time, and the new government—
America did not overthrow the governments. You can look at the crowds.
Oh, shut up, man. You know what? We heard your piece. They immediately threatened to kick the Russians out of the Sevastopol naval base. Only then did the Russians change the status quo on the Crimean Peninsula, which, by the way, belonged to Russia since the 1780s, since before the American Constitution.
So did Alaska. Should we give Alaska back?
Anyway, this guy's an idiot. But if you want me to keep talking with you, Pierce, I'll happily
finish your point.
You know, this guy sounds— I'll tell you what, with this guy talking about, oh, we just have to help them win. That's what they said for 20 years in Afghanistan. We just have to help the Tajiks and the Hazaras and the Uzbeks crush the Pashtuns. And once we're done, it'll be great. We can't sell them out now. We can't leave now. And then what happened? Hundreds of thousands of people killed, and they lost anyway. And everyone knows it's in the Wall Street Journal. It's in the Council on Foreign Relations Journal, Foreign Affairs. Even Richard Haass, the former president of the CFR, has a new piece in Foreign Affairs saying, give it up. We know that there's nothing America can do to help Ukraine retake the Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Crimea. They can't, unless you want to call in the B-2s and the B-52s and the U.S. Navy, at which point we have a general war. So the war is lost. So this guy can bloviate all he wants about how, no, it would be wrong to turn our back now. The Russians haven't even launched a full-scale mobilization in their country. This is a police action to them, while the Ukrainians are already running out of men, and Jake Sullivan is demanding that they increase conscription. That is slavery. On behalf of a war, we're looking at antiwar.com today. We have the
Russia
headline.
has conscription.
The majority of Ukrainians want to negotiate. There's your democracy for you. The majority of Ukrainians know that what I just said is true. Even Yulia Tymoshenko a year ago said it's time to negotiate.
Okay.
This guy's a fool.
And this is where Scott Horton just completely derails. He gets the floor, and instead of making a focused evidence-based argument, he just unleashes this sprawling mess of historical revisionism, personal insults, and half-baked blame shifting. Like, yeah, the history of US-Russia relations is complicated. We all get that. But Scott takes that complexity and weaponizes it with this weird narrative that basically lets Russia off the hook for invading a sovereign country. He starts off trying to sound thoughtful, citing NATO expansions and the US involvement in Ukraine's past, but just spirals fast. Within seconds, he's just yelling over people, calling Jake a fool, and acting like the annexation of Crimea was just some natural course correction. At one point, he even compares it to Alaska, as if that somehow justifies launching a full-scale war in 2022. The dude goes full Cold War conspiracy theorist, like he's still arguing on a blog forum in 2007. He just insists that the war is already lost, that Ukraine should just give up, and get this, uses a headline from antiwar.com as proof that majority of Ukrainians want to negotiate. No polling, no credible sources, just vibes. And when Jake pushes back earlier, asking real question, Horton just snaps. This guy clearly can't handle someone challenging his narratives, which makes it painfully obvious that this isn't about peace. It's about pushing a black and white version of history that just falls apart under the slightest pressure.
Okay, well, before I go to General Kimmett, again, I want to just get Jake to just respond to that, because you're a fool, apparently.
Well, according to this guy, democratic revolutions are never possible. We had one in this country in 1776.
What are you talking about? I didn't say that. Why don't you argue with something I said, you dumb bastard?
Wow. Okay. You got some anger
I didn't say
issues,
it was
man.
never possible. America spent $100 million to overthrow the government in Ukraine.
These guys
That's
on
not
this
a
panel are
democratic
arguing that the
revolution.
people of the former
That's
Soviet
Barack
republics
Obama
have
and
no
Joe
right to
Biden
self-determination.
overthrowing the government there.
They're saying that as soon as
Give me a
Putin installs
break.
a strong man in any of these countries that remains corrupt and loyal to him, change is never possible. Viktor Yanukovych was not killed. He was not imprisoned. He fled. He fled back to Russia. He fled back to his masters. And in my opinion,
So
when you're the
what does that have to do
president
with
of a
anything?
country and you
Because
flee
America
the country,
spent $100 million
you gave up your power.
overthrowing him. Look, man.
Okay, so if I'm being serious here. I genuinely want to understand the conspiracy that the United States is behind the color revolutions of these Soviet
you've never heard
republics.
of the National Endowment for
Because
Democracy, huh?
when Russia invaded, why did we offer them a ride? Why the delay in tanks? Why the delay in HIMARS? Why the delay in Patriot systems? Why the delay in F-16s? Why are we just giving approval for ATACMS this week after 1,000 days of the war if the conspiracy always was the United States was trying to separate Ukraine from Russia, that we're trying to install a CIA-backed government or whatever? I don't understand this conspiracy when we haven't done everything to fully support Ukraine.
Okay,
Can you explain this to me? Because I don't understand.
Okay, let me just time out for a second. I want to bring in General Kimmett. I'll come back to you, Scott.
Well,
I
he
promise
asked
you.
me something, Pierce, so let me answer it.
Okay.
Look, you're completely mixing up what I said about 2014 with then questions about 22. Clearly, as everyone on this panel knows, they announced repeatedly in the New York Times and the Washington Post in March and April of 22 that the purpose of the war now is to prolong it for the strategic weakening of Russia. So no amount of the weapons
Russia
you
can
just
stop
named,
this war at any time. Russia's
no
weakening
amount of the
themselves by
weapons you just
continuing
named
this war.
No amount of the weapons you just named would have turned the tide at that point.
Okay, let me bring in.
The Biden administration decided to trickle the weapons in, as you correctly described, in order to keep the war going.
All right, let me bring in General
Russia.
Kimmett. I want to bring in General Kimmett now. General Kimmett,
Oh, yeah,
a lot
you
of
don't
people have.
understand.
Hang on,
That's
Scott.
why-
Let me bring in the
that's
others.
The same reason they backed
there are
the
four
Mujahideen
people on
in
the panel.
Afghanistan in the 80s.
Scott, let me bring in General
bog
Kimmett. If you're
Russia
waiting
down
very.
and bleed them to bankruptcy.
Scott,
Do you
I will come
understand?
back to you.
Have you seen Rambo 3?
There are
It's
four
the
of us
same
on the
thing.
four
Are you
people on the
pro-Soviet
panel.
Union?
All
Do
right,
you want
guys,
the Soviet Union to
please,
still
time out.
exist?
Jesus
Time
Christ,
out,
you're
please.
so stupid. Give
General
me a break.
Kimmett, thank you for your patience.
And by the end of this whole debate, Scott Horton's meltdown is just almost hard to watch. He stops even pretending to debate and just starts lashing out, calling Jake names, interrupting non-stop, and spitting out this half-coherent conspiracy stew about America dragging Ukraine into war for sport. Jake, meanwhile, just stays composed, actually asks for clarity, and doesn't take the bait. That's the difference. One side is engaging in good faith, and the other is just flailing because their argument can't hold up under pressure. Even Piers is visibly done by the end. He's just trying to hold the reins while Scott just blurts out stuff about Rambo and calls people stupid. It's just wild. And it just proves the point. This whole isolationalist, blame America for everything narrative just falls apart the second someone like Jake shows up and exposes the biases with no hesitation. And speaking of biases, are you getting tired of getting news from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite? How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, whether it's left, right, or center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get a 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights in media bias and political trends. So stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.